Hello, everyone. I thought I would have a conversation with Frank Baler about this book. Frank Baler Finds TH, which people are telling me is absolutely fascinating. I invited him to come over to discuss the book with us. He promised me to be here, but he's not here yet. We'll see. He might arrive later. I want to tell you how I met Frank Baler. I did a conference, I did a talk at a hypnotherapy conference in 2002 in Atlanta, Georgia. The title of my talk was Mystical Hypnotherapy. And to give you a brief, at that time, when I started hypnotherapy back in the late 90s, 1996, and people were talking a lot about, regressions and your ability to experience other time periods. Regressions was like the big deal back then, right? And everybody wanted to know, I want a regression, I want a regression. This lady called me up once and says, hey, I want a regression. And I said, what for? She says, I want to know if I was a French princess before because I really like French perfume, that kind of thing. And everything was about regressions and past lives and all of this. But I had come into hypnotherapy from a very different background. I came into it from the perspective of mysticism, which is the ability to connect with higher dimensions. So I thought of hypnosis as a tool to get us to connect with higher dimensions. That was really my only interest in it. It was later that I realized it could also be used for therapeutic reasons, to stop smoking, lose weight, that kind of thing, to change our minds, right? But to me, the big deal was, can we connect to higher dimensions? So that's what I meant, when I was talking in the early years about mystical hypnotherapy. Well, 2002, it was still early on in my career, and it was one of those where, you're starting out, you think you know something that the others don't, and it's kind of cute now. But I applied for this conference. It was summer of 2002. I'll never forget it because on my way over there, I injured my back so bad that I couldn't walk. I really couldn't walk. And so I found a chiropractor over there in Atlanta, Georgia, the day before my talk. And the guy says, oh, I don't know, you have to do this and that and the other. And I just couldn't walk, much less stand on stage and talk for an hour. I did one of those hypnosis thing, and I connected with whatever I thought I connected with. And I told what I thought were the masters. And I said, if you want me to do your talk, let me do your talk, whatever. And the next day I woke up and I was fine enough to go do the talk, So I stood there on stage, and I told the people what had happened the days before, because I got injured. To give an idea, when I was getting off the airplane in Atlanta, Georgia, I couldn't get out. I had to lay down on the floor of the plane in the aisle, and I couldn't move anymore. My back spasmed, there was a spasm or something, and I couldn't move. So I just laid down. It was one of those movie type of scenes, And anyway, so I did the talk and it was great. And when I finished the talk, I remained at the conference there for a couple more days, and everybody kept coming up to me and telling me, Jake wants to talk to you. Oh, did you talk to Jake yet? Jake's looking for you. Jake's looking for me. I was all around the hotel. I don't know why Jake couldn't find me. But apparently there is a guy by the name of Jake who wanted to talk to me. So I kept asking, who is Jake? Now, this is a funny part of the story. I had never heard the name Jake up until that time. When I got home, at that time I only had two daughters. Since then I've had two more. I told my daughters, I met this guy by the name of Jake, and I never heard of that name, so I think he's an alien. And my daughters were laughing. No, Dad, Jake's a name. It's a thing. I said, no, I never heard of it. It cannot be a real name. I think the guy's an alien. Anyway, I'll never forget. I eventually met Jake, and this guy was really not weird in the sense of weird, but he was different from a conventional person. I'll never forget it. He was wearing a white shirt, short sleeve, white dress shirt, but short sleeve, and he was wearing gray pants. And I kept looking at him because his hair was gray, not black, not white, but gray. And it was the exact same tone as his pants, a gray tone. His hair and his pants matched exactly. His shoes were also gray. It was just really odd. And this guy was super clean cut, super polite, super polished. And he said to me that he had been to my talk and that I made a few good points. But essentially, he let me know you have a couple things to learn. And make a long story short, when I came back from Atlanta, I met Frank Baler. And it's been a fruitful, interesting relationship. Anyway, this book is quite interesting. People have been reading it, and I've been getting text messages and phone calls. What is this? What is that? I want to read the book to you. We're going to do this in installments, of course, in little pieces. And because I have discussed this at length with him, and because I have read the book many, many, many times over. I mean, just the other day I read it again because I find it fascinating. I can't put it down. I think it's such an awesome book. So I think this past weekend I read it again, and every time I read it, I go, dude, this is awesome. And so Frank Baler and I have had this relationship when I've always told him, I said, dude, I want to be like you when I grow up. And he laughs. Anyway, let me read the book to you, and what I'm going to do is read in little small chunks at a time and do my best to explain to you what I think he meant when he wrote these words, okay? So here's the first part of the book I have here on my Kindle. Incidentally, I think you can get the book for free right now on the Kindle edition if you don't have it. So dedication. This book is dedicated to you if you lost hope, if you feel broken, if you feel that nothing makes sense in your life, if you feel that the forces of darkness got to you, or if you feel deeply betrayed, read this book. I wish I could sit with you and tell you that you will be okay, for I have been there and I found better than okay. I found joy, and so can you. There's a lot I could not tell you in this brief account you're about to read. I can tell you, however, that you are loved immensely. Please know that each of you is deeply loved by God. Despite searching for higher truth all my life, I still carry many flaws as a man. What I found, though, and what I hope each of you finds as well, is that God's plan for our lives is always perfect, even when we do not believe we can go on. I can now assure you that God is at work in our lives and that all things bring us closer to the light. May your awareness of God's blessings bring each of you eternal joy. Frank Baler. Then he talks about, and I think that's an important point that he makes, because all of you know, I'm a hypnotherapist myself, and I walk around and I see, I work with a lot of people, and a lot of people are hurting. A lot of people are hurting. Just last night, I was in a session, and this man I'm working with has lost two close, dear friends. One to suicide, one to a drug overdose in the last week. People are hurting. People are really, really hurting. And I think that if a person is really, really hurting, it would be good to take a look at what else is out there. What are we? And this book might be a ray of light into many people's lives. So then there's this thing about the personal portal, which, look, Frank Baler handed me this manuscript in 2012 and told me what to do with it. So I cleaned it up a little bit and published it. And I would really appreciate an honest review on Amazon to help other people find the book, because this book will bring a lot of hope and healing to a lot of people, perhaps even you. As I read on and explain what I think he meant when he wrote it, I think you're going to see how this could be so useful to so many people. So you can get the Kindle version of the book for free. If you have a few dollars, you want to get the paper version, it's on Amazon. And if you would be so kind as to put a useful review there, that would be really delightful. I would really appreciate that. So let's take a look at what the book says. Part 1, Adventures in Duality. Acknowledgement. I wrote this book in 33 days. Then I sat in the computer for 2 years untouched. It took 3 months to edit the manuscript when I got to it. The changes during editing were minimal. Two professional editors then reviewed the manuscript thoroughly. They made only minor changes. Then 2 more years passed with the manuscript untouched. Could I have written this book in 33 days? Clearly not. I believe we're all capable of tapping into a higher wisdom. And I believe that higher wisdom wrote this book. I just typed it into the computer. I want to acknowledge, therefore, that higher wisdom for having chosen me to type its book. And I think that's an important point. And then we go to the beginning of the end. My name is Frank. I have always been interested in mysteries. When I was 6 years old, I loved hosing down the driveway of the sidewalk in front of the house where we lived. I would look at the stream of water emanating from the hose and the effect it had on the gravel and pebbles on the sidewalk. The experience was mesmerizing to me. One night, I had a dream in which my father told me not to dig too deep into anything, referring in the dream to the water and the crevices between the rocks I wanted to clean and the water that emanated from the end of the hose. The more I dug in, my father said in the dream, the more stuff would come out, and there would be no end to it. Years later, as a hypnotherapist, I often thought of that dream. I dug in as deep as possible with anyone who would come in to see me. In some cases, I dug so deep that people felt hurt. I would never stop. There's more there, and we're going to get to the bottom of it, I always thought. The same thing happened in my personal life. I dug into people as though our lives depend on it. To be honest, I do believe our lives depend on it because to me, digging into ourselves while looking at the mirror of our relationships is the best way to grow. And growth, to me, is the only reason and purpose for life itself. Naturally, I hurt everyone in my life. I mean, everyone. I alienated myself and became miserable. Yet, even in my darkest hour, which you will read about later, I never stopped digging into myself and into the mysteries. I later discovered what one of my mentors would call a divine paradox. The worst things that happen in my life turn out to be the best things, and the best things, in some cases, turn out to be the worst. I have certainly lived both branches of the paradox. I hurt beautiful people who did not deserve to be hurt by me or by anyone else. When I owned what I had done, I determined never to hurt others again. That determination came with a challenge to myself. I would never hurt others again or I would die. Hurting myself was out of the question, but I would find a way to remove myself from this world, which I came to believe would be better off without me in it. Once I issued the challenge to myself, I had to unravel the origin of the offensive behaviors that were so natural to me. Psychological explanations relating childhood events to adult behavior made no sense to me because I knew I had chosen those parents and circumstances for my birth. No, I was like that before birth, and I had to own who I really was. That would be the only way to heal for real. It was time to dig deep into the mysteries I had been dabbling in from the surface. What follows is an account of my journey, a journey filled with bright and dark moments, finally ending in profound joy. I'll tell you about the out of this world experience as honestly and accurately as I possibly can. I'll tell you a little about the events that brought me to that point. Then I'll tell you about this amazing journey that I could not have imagined or dreamt even if I wanted to. I'll tell you exactly what happened and how it happened. It is true that writing the original manuscript took 33 days. I barely slept at the time, and I was not working at my usual load, so I spent much time typing on a small laptop. The original manuscript, however, contained close to 150,000 words. There were two other problems with the original manuscript that caused its publication to be delayed by 4 years. The original manuscript was written by February 2020 and first published in April of 2024. The first problem had to do with the protection of identity. I did not want any of the characters mentioned here to be related to people outside of this account. That problem was solved, and the book was then edited by two professional writers who loved the work. The second problem was the length of the book. The complete story tells two stories intertwined into one. How could I abbreviate it? What is non-essential? That problem was solved. The third problem was the most complicated for me. I continued experiencing a personal problem even after everything you read about here happened. I did not know how to feel good about this narrative while at the same time still struggling with a personal problem. The third literary problem was solved, and here you have its product. I hope that reading this book brings you healing and joy. So, look, I when I read this, and I've read this, like I told you, many times, I kind of laugh because when you read the whole book, you realize that this guy, Frank Baler, had been on this path for many years and had done some relatively interesting things up until then with his life in terms of the mystical path, right? And he achieved some really high marks on that road, if you will. And it's interesting because it says here that when he came to that crisis, the mystics usually call the dark night of the soul, he said that, you know, the only way out was to dig into the mysteries. In other words, apply himself even more to the mysteries that he had only been dabbling in from the surface. And I laugh at that because I've talked to him about this many times, and if you had met this man before, you would have noticed that he was 100% dedicated to this cause. His personal life, his finances, I mean, everything, his entire life was about this. And the way he characterized it is, I was only dabbling in it from the surface. Now it's time to actually dig in. So, you know, having known him before and having known him through the years, I go, wow, that's like, this guy is intense because, and look, anybody who has accomplished anything is intense. And I don't think Frank Baler is an exception. So what we're going to do in the subsequent days is I'm going to read little passages and comment on it because these introductory remarks are interesting, but it hasn't really gotten into the meat of the book yet. So what I suggest you do is subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with your friends, and I will piece by piece read the entire book to you so that you have the whole story, but more importantly, I'll do my best to explain what Frank Baler meant when he wrote the book, and maybe one of these days he'll show up here and talk to us. We'll see. I'll keep on trying. All right. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day.